All right, I'm here with Jane the Virgin series creator, Jennie Urman, which is about to conclude its third season as the CW's most awarded, most critically acclaimed series that they still have. And your show has kind of etched the stuff into the awards history book with Jane, of course, herself, Gina Rodriguez, I'm talking about, who won a Golden Globe, have 3 consecutive Golden Globe nominations, which is the first in the CW, UK, and WB conglomerate. And you just had your Emmy event a couple of weeks ago where we saw each other, and it was moderated by James Corden, brilliantly moderated, to a packed TV Academy auditorium. I've been to several of the events, and that was probably one of the most full that I'd seen. So like, you're ingrained internally in making Jane the hit that it is, but when you step outside and see the impact that Jane has made on the accolade front and everything else, does it still continue to boggle your mind that, I mean, the show is just churning like a well-oiled machine at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming, and it's also nerve-wracking because it doesn't really churn like a well-oiled machine. You know, it's still as hard to make the episodes as it was to make episode 2. Like we still feel in the writer's room the same pressure to make it work and to keep it fresh and to make it new. And so I think I think somewhere in the middle of the second season, I thought like, oh, this isn't going to just sort of click in and become easier. So now I'm more used to the idea that it's hard work, but I'm so grateful for it, and I'm so grateful for the response that it's had, and I'm so grateful for the impact that it's had on people. You know, the tweets of people that tell me how much it means to them, and you know, that's still as overwhelming and rewarding. But it's hard. So it never feels like it's churning or clicking in. It always feels like, okay, how do we keep this? All these balls in the air. How do we keep it fresh? How do we keep it interesting? How do we not repeat ourselves? How are we digging deeper into these characters? How are we keeping it fresh? All of those questions, you know, keep me up at night.
Well, I mean, from an outsider's perspective, it seems like you guys have everything so well mapped out strategically. I'm sure on the background that it's crazy, like any other production is. But especially kind of this year. I mean, you'd said before that where you were going to take Jane in season 3, that you were, that season 2 was kind of a setup for season 3, and you were packing a lot into the third season. We had Michael's recovery, we had Xiomara's abortion, and Jane losing her virginity, and so the title kind of changed there. And then in changing the show's title, you also changed a massive part of it, which had to do with Michael's death, and then having to jump 3 years. And you focus on immigration recently, which was a great episode, and I mean, just speaks to exactly what's going on right now, which was great. And then, of course, Jane having a potential love interest after, Michael's death. And I mean, when you had, did you know that this season was going to be such a big season for the show in terms of changing it pretty much creatively? And did you have any reservations in making any of those changes?
Yeah, I mean, I have this brilliant, strong writer's room, and we really do talk through everything and the ramifications of every move that we make. So we really tried to think through everything. And part of that process is saying, is this a good move? And tell me all the reasons that it's not, so that we can, go down other avenues before landing at something. That said, we knew that this was going to be like, we all felt as sort of a current in the room that she was going to lose her virginity this year. We had sort of taken that premise and found all the iterations of it and all the comedy and all the drama, and it was time. And I've always said that the show is so much more than the title, and Jane is so much more than a virgin. So it was time to show other people what that meant, really. So that we knew that moment was coming, and we knew going in that this was going to be the year that Michael was going to die, and we were going to jump ahead 3 years. Even though we knew that and we mapped it out, we still every couple of weeks we would come back to the room and say, is this the right move? Here's the reasons I don't think we should do it. Here's the reasons I do think we should do it. Could we do this? Because partly we love the actor so much. We love Brett so much. We knew we were changing a lot. So we didn't want to do anything lightly. But that said, we would come back to the story at the same point. And the writers would always say, this was your gut, and this is the story that you wanted to tell for a while. And I appreciated that too, reminding me to trust my gut in certain instances. And then just sort of knowing what it would open up and how it would change the show and let the character grow. And I just felt so strongly that I didn't want us to get stuck, and that we couldn't keep going back through that same love triangle, because at a certain point your main character starts to lose credibility, because you're like, I don't understand. You made up your mind and now you're changing it again. Who are you? So I knew that was part of it. I knew that we wanted to deal with, our show always works better, even though it's really light and fun and comic. It always works the best when there's something real underneath, sort of girding it emotionally, because we have this extraordinary actress in Gina that can play all of those levels and all of those subtleties. And it just felt like this loss was going to be something that was going to be challenging for us, but also that I felt like we had enough bones of the show to recover from. And as long as we sort of took the audience's hand and let them recover with us, they would sort of see where we were going and trust the story and the storytelling. So, you have to take leaps of faith, and you have to make big moves, I think, in order not to just keep doing the same thing. And I get bored easily. So I want to do different things and tell different kinds of stories, and see how we can stretch and make things difficult, and then see how you can get out of them.
Well, you mentioned that you like to change things up, and I know before you had mentioned in one of our interviews that that you already know the end game for Jane, that what the end is going to be. So is this journey that she's on? Because I mean, in season 1, it was all about the artificial insemination. In season 2 was about the love triangle. In season 3, it's about some major, it's almost like at points you take her out of the telenovela realm, because you're giving her such emotional, real life events that are surrounding her. And that's what I love about the show, is that it's like dancing on the head of a needle. It's like it can go drama, it can go comedy, especially this season. Has this always been part of Jane's path, or did you change something along the way to get to that end point?
The end points remained the same, and and this midpoint was always mapped out. The show, of course, is like a living, breathing thing, and you see, oh my gosh, this is working, and this relationship is interesting. How much more can we dig into that? So like the minutiae is never planned out, and you want to like say, oh, well, here we're gonna have a 4-episode arc with Jane having a fling, and what does that feel like? And I might think, oh, it's all going to be fun, and then suddenly I'll be like, wait, when is she's got to be nervous. And I'll start to think, oh my gosh, she hasn't had sex in 3 years, and it's only with one person, and what does that feel like? So you always want to be open to sort of mining all the emotions, and you have a character that pops, you want to write more in that direction, all of those things. But the basic skeleton and frame of the story has been the same since I pitched the show. Because it's partly because it's a telenovela, and they are written with endings, and I wanted to know where we were going to go before we started the journey. Within that, there's so many, twists and turns, and new ideas that come in that are better than the ideas that you had, and all of that. But we started off this year, saying like, from the production. Cast everything, that at the midpoint there was going to be a significant change. I mean, we rebuilt our sets in the middle of the season this year in order to transform it to a kids' hotel. It felt like episode 11, we were shooting a pilot in the middle of a season of TV, is how it felt, because the sets were all new. We were introducing people back in after 3 years, and not wanting it all to be heavy exposition. How do you tell that story? How do you fill in the gaps? And especially after such a cataclysmic event, how do you make it interesting and true emotionally, but also understand that 3 years has passed? So this year was particularly challenging, I think, on a storytelling level, but also rewarding. And, I can't imagine straying from the ending at this point.
That's good. I was just curious because I know, you had mentioned that there's a lot of things that, like you said, that you pick up on a lot of current events and everything, and you kind of infiltrate that into Jane. So I didn't know if her path to this point had changed.
The one thing that did change in there was that, it was a 3-year time jump, and we all felt very strongly that we couldn't really be, this weird, I always joke that maybe it's like Tiago would go through like a loop time jump and land exactly where he is. We're still in the current because of like what happened at the election and the fact that we wanted to talk about that and engage with it. So we'd always thought we're going to jump ahead and we might not be able to talk about current events as much in the same way because we'll be 3 years ahead. But we've sort of taken 3 years ahead and gone through some space-time continuum, and we're still in the present.
Now, as we've kind of touched on a little bit already, is that a big part of the season was that bombshell episode 10 death of Michael. You and I chatted briefly at the Emmy event, and I was asking you, did you expect the kind of outcries and uproar and just, I guess, it's a testament to Brett in itself because he's just made something that was so incredible in that character. But did you, was the reaction stronger than even you and everybody else there could have thought, or was it on par on what you wanted it to be because Michael was such a special character?
It's tricky. I think it was a little bit more outrage than I expected, because I expected that people, know that this is a story and this is, I was shocked by the amount of like, how could you do this to us? You don't like this character. Just because you don't like this character doesn't mean the rest of us don't get that. Like that was confusing to me, because it's a story. But I wasn't surprised by the loss that people would feel, because I felt like Brett was so lovable. We teed it up and gave him story after story, showing how their relationship was really strong and how they were, so important to one another, and how they had this great communication and how they could work through problems. So, on the writer's side, we were teeing up the story to have a pretty big reaction. So it was a combination of surprise, but understanding the weight of how much Brett and the character meant to people, and also, trying to say to the audience, like, trust us, we're not forgetting that he's never going to be not part of our story and of Jane's story, and there's only so much you can communicate to people without giving things away. But, I wanted to tell people it's not like he died and he's never going to be addressed. This is the whole entire thrust of this second half, is moving on from that. And how do you recapture joy and love and optimism in the face of a tragedy? So I wanted people to just trust that in the story and the storytelling.
So, and I'll be honest, when Brett passed away, or Michael passed away, Brett's still alive and healthy. When Michael passed away on the show, I thought it was going to be a big blow to the show, because he brought in such heart and such comedic value there. And I was kind of scared. I shouldn't have been, because it's you guys, but I was kind of scared of that time jump. When you let I assume a lot of the writers already knew, but at the beginning of the season, did you maybe bring your writers all into kind of an all hands on deck? And was there any kind of preparation for okay, we have, the show is already special. It has a huge following, a strong fan base. We've got to kind of stick to, what Jane actually is, or did you guys just go one after one?
It was, most of us have been there for a while, so we all knew that this was the event. But like I said, we sort of agreed when it would be, and then every couple of weeks somebody would say, wait, I don't know if we should do this. Here are the reasons why. And they would make really compelling arguments. And I'd be like, I think you're right. And then I would go home and think about it, and then come back. And, one of the biggest things is that this is, can you recapture the joy? Can we get back to it? And I just felt like we could, as long as we didn't do it too quickly, too shockingly, as long as we carried him with us and with Jane in her heart. And it was more also a sense of I didn't know where the story was going to go without that event, because so much of how I thought about the second half was informed by that choice. So I was very scared to do it, but I also felt like, you know, this was the story that I wanted to tell. I wanted to see how this character who's so optimistic and has such a belief in fairy tales and happily ever after, how does she deal when the most tragic thing happens, and how can she recapture that, was part of that story that I wanted to tell. So I think you have to follow your, you know, your instinct creatively. And, you know, I would just keep saying, well, then that's our challenge. How do we build the joy back in? That's our challenge. Let's work for it. Like, let's figure it out. We are going to be missing that. We are going to be missing the joy of Brett and of his and Gina's relationship, and how magnetic they were together, and how it had an idealization to it, of that they could work and talk through everything, and they were so faithful and loyal to each other when they finally came back together. So I felt that that was going to be difficult. I had faith that we could do it. And, you know, it's like, there's something creatively, I think, empowering and inspiring when you have limitations, or when you make things harder for yourself. And a little bit, this was like we were giving ourselves a really hard job to do in the second half of the season, which is make it exuberant again and give Jane permission, so that people are wanting her to meet someone else, and wanting her to move on, and wanting her to find love and joy and happiness again. So I was nervous. I had faith in us.
Well, speaking of hard, I mean, I've heard everybody ask you in interviews about, you know, right off the bat about Michael's death and why did you have to let him go and everything else. But I know how close your cast is, and I know how close you are with your cast. You, as a showrunner, as Jennie Urman, how hard was it for you to make that decision to let Brett, or to have Michael expire, and to then have to tell Brett? I mean, I know how close you guys are, so I imagine that it had to have been really tough.
I mean, that was the hardest thing. And it's how hard it was is just testament to who he is, and what, you know, our bond was, as you said, and also how close the cast was, and how much I loved writing for him too. You know, so all of those things together made it really hard. And, you know, I told Brett at the end of the second season, so that he had all of hiatus, you know, to know that that was happening and it wouldn't be shocking. And then told everybody individually, and every single person cried when I told them. You know, I talked to each actor, and every actor, and was just devastated. And I understood that. You know, and I told them, I usually keep the stories close to the vest, but I told them all about the story, so that they would know it was 100% creatively driven. And, you know, that it was going to be hard and devastating. I just knew it was going to be. You know, Brett was the kind of actor on our show who would, you know, write to me all the time and be like, did you see this scene? Is there any way I could improve it? Is there anything you think I could be doing better? Please always give me feedback. I mean, he's just a dream in every single way. You know, there was just, I would get these emails. I was thinking about this. What do you think about this? He was so engaged and so, such a passionate actor. You know, it would have been easier if he was an asshole. Then, you know, you wouldn't think twice, you know. But who Brett is made it all infinitely harder. And, you know, we all miss him still. And he was back for the finale. And it was like, you know, hallelujah, he was back. We were just so happy.
Well, speaking of hard as well, you know, you have this incredible lead actress that we kind of chatted about just even before this, just because of her phone call scene last night.
Yeah.
You put a lot on her plate this year. I mean, there has been so much, the time jump and then the death and everything else, now the wedding planning and getting back into the dating game, and you know, helping Michael with his recovery early on. And I know she had mentioned to me that she went to Thailand, and it kind of helped her kind of, you know, digest some of what was going on there. You know, there must be at this point so much trust with Gina from you to give her pretty much anything that you could throw at her that you know that she'll be up for. Can you tell us a little bit about how, I mean, how that works between you two?
I mean, I just have never met anyone like her. You know, you sit and watch what she does in editing, and sometimes I'm just like, oh my God. I mean, just stunned. And the editors, you know, are stunned because they watch every single take. There's nothing that she can't ground, make authentic. I've never seen her hit a false note. I've seen her, you know, so sick because she works so hard, and yet, like, when we're rolling, you would never know. I like, during episode 19, I feel like she was a little bit under the weather for that episode that aired last night. And you saw that phone call that she did. It's like, she just lives and breathes and becomes this character. It frees you up tremendously as a writer, because I know whatever I write, the most broad comedy, the most detailed moment of despair, she's going to find notes that I didn't know were there, and she's going to ground it and make it real. So it's pretty thrilling in the writer's room, you know, because there's nothing she can't do. And that was another reason that I had faith that we could continue past Michael, because I knew that Gina was not good. Like, her acting was going to be holding the audience's hand and showing them the pain and making them root for her to find the joy again, you know, and that's because of what she can do. I mean, every time I'm in a scene, I'm like, oh, my favorite scenes are Jane and Petra. Oh my God, but Jane and her mother, those are my favorite. Oh, but Jane and her son, like, every time she does something, I'm astounded. And the thing that people don't realize is that she's also this, like, technically brilliant actress who will pick up the cup every time in the same exact way as she's doing this incredibly emotional moment. So you have endless options in the cutting room. She's the most professional actress I've ever worked with. She never has not known her lines. She's never not there in such a real, committed way. It's really inspiring. And knowing that I have this actress who there's nothing she can't do, you know, makes me work harder, because I want to give her material that's worthy of what she can do. So I feel like it's a gift. I don't take her for granted. I'm so grateful that I get to work with her. She's really one of a kind. I could talk about Gina forever. It's incredible what she could do. Sometimes the editors come out and just, like, find me in the middle of the day, and they're like, can you just send her a little note and tell her that this scene, like, I've never seen anything like it. And it'll just be like, it's pretty remarkable. It's pretty remarkable. An episode that aired last night, 19, she had that phone call where her feelings for Raphael are returning, and yet she wants to, that scares her and also makes her think that she was a selfish person, and she's trying to get Raphael and Petra back together, and she's also drunk. And, you know, you feel every single thing that she's playing all at once, and she's playing 19 different things, you know, and having conflicting emotions that you're watching change by the minute, and you're feeling both her hope of bringing these two people together and her pain and the fact that she's wasted. I mean, it's a masterclass, really. For me, I'm watching her. It's stunning, and I'm always like, I gotta keep my game up so that I give her material that's worthy of her.
That's pressure.
Yes, it is. It is. It is. I don't want her. I want her to, like, get to do everything, because I mean, you know, you just, oh, we should do that for her. We, like, you know, I have so many different kinds of magical realism things I want to do next year. A lot of it's about, like, what I want to see Gina doing too.
Well, speaking of writing, so you know, the Emmy nominations are coming up here pretty soon, and obviously Jane is in contention for a comedy series nomination, and Gina for an Emmy nomination herself in the lead actress category. You are able to submit the one or, you know, as many of your episodes actually as you want for writing consideration. Is there one or two that you are thinking of submitting? We haven't seen the finale yet, I should say, because it doesn't air till Monday, so that could be one. But is there a standout one to you? I know at a lot of these screening events, episode 55 seems to kind of jump out.
Yeah, that's because that was the sort of repiloting in the middle, and I felt like there was a big degree of difficulty in reinventing the show, reinventing the sets, catching people up. I love that one. I liked the season opener as well, and you know, when Jane was trying to figure out if Michael would live or die, I liked the past and the present and how that worked together. I loved the second episode, which was his recovery and Rogelio's sort of Emma Lazarus moment. I don't know, it's so hard to think about. I loved, there was a lot of episodes that I liked this year and that I'm proud to have been a part of. I have to think about it.
Well, it's been an excellent season, like I mentioned before. And then real quick on this point, there's one, I think, unsung hero that, you know, people mention and they know and they just don't really talk too much about, and that's your two-time Emmy nominee narrator, Anthony Mendez. And
yeah,
I'm just curious, after 3 seasons, I remember at first when we first talked, you had mentioned that, you know, that was one thing that you pitched, and CW was kind of unsure if they like wanted a narrator, and now I'm sure they're all in, obviously. But at this point, do you just write as much for Anthony as you possibly can because he's just so good at it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just another character in the show, another lead character in the show, you know, and I know he's going to make things funny. I know he's going to, he's a pleasure to work with. I will say if one thing is like churning on, it's those sessions, you know, because he records first with Gina Lamar, one of our producers and directors, and then I get to come in at the end and we just play around with a few lines. And he has a giant backstory about his character and how he feels about each character. He's such a skilled actor, and writing for the narrator is obviously one of our favorite parts, you know, and we try to give out little pieces of information about him. You know, at the end of the series, I've always said, you'll find out who he is in relation to the story. But yeah, it's like writing, you know, we write for Jane, we write for Rogelio, we write for the narrator, you know, he's one of the main characters of the show. And his skill, I mean, because he's narrating, but he is like, he's watching, he's responding, he's, you know, he's giving us comedy and drama, and his skill is unparalleled, I think.
I'm going to just finish up here with a few fan questions. Jennifer A asks, the sets are such vibrant colors, all of them. Is this a reflection of the Miami culture, or is it deliberate to elicit some kind of emotion?
Both. You know, I wanted the show to be light and bright and optimistic always. I wanted there to be a really controlled color palette, that sort of a different one for Jane's World, a different one for the Marbella Hotel, and a slightly different one for the actual telenovela within our telenovela. It's, you know, we keep it to these blues and corals, and part of that is sort of feeling the water of Miami, and part of it is a little bit of the, you know, fairy tale with a lowercase f, of, you know, a little bit of fairy dust on everything, that it looks vibrant, that it feels the way I want the show to feel. You know, we don't use, there's not black on the show, really. There's not bright red. There's nothing that's like so, you know, more stark, aggressive colors. It's supposed to feel a little bit more candy-colored, wish fulfillment, and different from a lot of the darkness on TV.
Frieza wants to know, the book Snow Falling, Jane's book that she wrote, is this a book that was also written by you to help you grieve Michael's death yourself?
I have not written Snow Falling. The joke in the writer's room was that I had, of course, you know, that I could tell them what's in each chapter, but I haven't written that book. Jane's writing will evolve, and this is her first novel, and, you know, we did want it to be an homage to her love story with Michael, and that she had worked through her grief by giving them the happy ending that they didn't have.
And final question, James wants to know, excuse me, if you could be one of your own characters on the show, not Jane, who would it be?
Rogelio. I feel like he just lives with a certain amount of joy, an incredible amount of confidence that I can't even dream of, and a real passion and zest for life. So I feel if I could be anyone, I'd love to be him.
That's I bet there's a lot of majority of people would love to have Rogelio's confidence and everything else. Well, thank you so much for joining us once again. Congratulations on the success of the show. It's like I mentioned, you know, it's an incredible season so far, probably my favorite. And best of luck at the Emmys. If I could go door to door, you know, I would go door to door to every voter for it. So
You're the best.
thanks so much again, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for talking to me.